We're going to continue this conversation, dive in a little further with our friend Benjamin Rad, a lecturer of global studies over at UCLA. Benjamin, always good to see you. Let's talk about this point that Trey had at the end of that report, saying that unless the government completely collapses, nothing's going to change until those elections are held in October. But what is that even a possibility for the government in Israel to collapse?
It is, yeah, it is, and thank you for having me back. It is if we have a situation where the existing members in the cabinet, the part of this coalition, I should say, withdraw their support. So these far-right members, the two ministers who have cabinet positions, they lead a party or two parties that have a sizable number in the parliament. They are the ones that have allowed Netanyahu to remain in power by joining with his coalition. If they were to withdraw their support, as they have threatened to do, based on what Netanyahu's actions are in Gaza, then the government will collapse well before the 2026 October period on its own.
Are we seeing it becoming more and more likely that these other members are going to withdraw their support? I mean, is Netanyahu's popularity levels, even within his own parliament, kind of dissolving before our very eyes?
Yeah, and the problem is there isn't a consensus opposition figure that could really lead a push against Netanyahu. I mean, Gantz has his supporters, and there are others as well. But what you really need is somebody from maybe within Likud who is younger, of a different mindset than Netanyahu, who could offer an alternative that would appeal to and appease the existing Likud, the conservative voters and their bloc, but somebody other than Netanyahu. So we're not seeing that yet. Now, to your original question of is it likely that those two ministers might depart, they've been threatening to do so, and there's no indication that their threats are a bluff. They very much are ideologues. They are prepared to leave the government, allow it to collapse, and remain loyal to the positions they've held.
And we've already seen it with Benny Gantz, so clearly it's something that is possible to happen once again. Let's get back to that big news, Netanyahu announcing that he has dissolved his war cabinet, making that announcement earlier today. How is this going to affect ceasefire negotiations going forward?
Well, it's a formality. With the departure of two ministers, including Gantz, the cabinet is all but non-existent anyway. And so it was really just sort of a shell of an entity at this point. And as far as the ceasefire negotiations are concerned, Netanyahu has made it clear that he dictates the tone and tenor of these negotiations and the negotiation process. We know that the last overture made by the United States that got a 14-0 UN vote in its favor was essentially rebuffed by Hamas or returned by Hamas with conditions that made it unworkable. So at this point, I believe that Netanyahu's ability to engage in these negotiations, they can proceed as they have been. The United States is doing its part to present proposals, offer proposals to the international community, to the people of Gaza, to the Arab supporters in a way that would check off the boxes that both sides really want to see checked off. The question becomes, can they get Hamas's leadership in Gaza, specifically Yahya Sinwar, its military leader, to agree to these terms? And that's where it doesn't matter whether there's a war cabinet or Netanyahu favors this or that. Ultimately, if Yahya Sinwar of Hamas is opposed to an element of the deal, it's not going anywhere, regardless of anyone else's support.
And then kind of putting Hamas on the back burner for right now, Hezbollah becoming a bigger and bigger figure when it comes to this war. We've actually heard from Israeli officials warning that the country is on the brink of a full-out war with Hezbollah. In terms of what that timeline looks like, what do they mean when they say a brink, and how would that look going forward? How much more stress would that cause to the IDF?
Yeah, the IDF is stretched pretty thin as it is, with a lot of its units mobilized in Gaza, and then also a good number on the West Bank to quell any violence and uprising there. The issue really these two have been exchanging rocket fire. Hezbollah joined the Hamas attack, so to speak. Since October 7th, it has been launching missiles and rockets and cross-border incursions from the north into Israel. So none of that is new. What's happened in the last 3 or 4 days is it really stepped up its barrage of rockets, sending also exploding kamikaze-style drones into Israel and into parts of Israel that are further south of the border than it had previously attacked. And this is in some part due to the assassination of one of its senior commanders by Israel last week. And it was a pretty bold move on Israel's part. It was a successful operation from their military standpoint. And for Hezbollah, is definitely something they felt the need to send a signal and retaliate towards. Now, we also have something else to keep in mind coming up later this year, later this fall. elections in Iran for parliament and for the presidency. So there might be some maneuvering, some posturing as well. Hezbollah's biggest backer, its financier, its patron is the Islamic Republic. And so there's a lot going on right now about what position of strength Hezbollah wants to put itself in, what the Iranian government, the Islamic Republic, wants to see happen in the run-up to these elections.
Finally, Benjamin, we also heard from John Kirby at the White House press briefing detailing recent Houthi attacks. So right now we're looking at Hamas, Hezbollah, Houthis. So what is the landscape looking like going forward? Who's going to gain that stronger power? Is Israel going to regret those bold moves that it did in Lebanon?
Well, as far as the Houthis are concerned, it's the benefit here for Israel and for those opposed to what the Houthis are doing is that there is a broader coalition of naval forces, military forces, looking to mitigate and intercept Houthi attacks in the Red Sea and other areas in the region before they can cause any real damage and real harm. So I don't see the Houthis as a major threat. They are at this point a nuisance, but they're not capable of escalating the situation any further than they already have. They can make shipping difficult. They can make conditions a pain, so to speak, but it's not like they're going to be able to launch any major incursion or escalation from the south that would impact Israel significantly, to the extent that it's diverting resources away from the war in Gaza and from the northern front. And so I think right now the focus for Israel is going to remain in the short term what Hezbollah is doing, how it can intercept those rockets, and specifically also those drones that are being launched. And Hezbollah's barrage recently is definitely testing Israel's Iron Dome defense system, its missile defense system, that worked well against the attacks from Iran several weeks ago or a month or so ago. But now it's really being tested given how close Hezbollah is to those Iron Dome systems.
Benjamin, we're going to leave it at that. Always good to have you here dissecting all the latest information on these wars that we're following internationally. Benjamin Rad, Lecturer of Global Studies at UCLA. We'll talk soon.
Thank you.